Hi, everybody, and welcome to our very first webinar for 2026. We're super excited to be back again. And today, cannot wait for the conversation today. We are joined by our fantastic gold partners, Calabrio, and we are lucky enough to be joined by Jeremy from Aussie Broadband, and we are going to get underneath how it is that Aussie Broadband have built a robust WFM practice. Um, it is rare that you get to have a really candid and open conversation with a leader from within an organization who's going to share their insights. They also bring all this experience from many years within that WFM space. So super excited to hear and learn more about the process that Aussie has been through, particularly from that WFM perspective and leading into the future with this real data-driven WFM operation. So super excited for that. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today with us. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of our special guests, Jeremy and Richard, we hope that we spark some interest in you to think about, what is it within your control that you can take back to your respective businesses, and how can you think differently based on the success that we're seeing with Aussie Broadband and the different things they've done internally. There's such a great opportunity to learn from what's working well for other organisations. So we hope you take a lot from it. To round the session off, we'll have some Q&A, but there's an opportunity for you to participate throughout. I'm Fran Southwood, CEO of Auscontact, and your moderator for today. So I get to ask those tough questions of Jeremy and Richard. While we're waiting, I'll just go through just some general housekeeping with you. The best way for you to get the most out of this is to interact. It maximises the benefits you take away, but equally, if you've got a question, we want you to ask it. We want to give you that opportunity to actually tap into the things that will make a difference for you in your organisation. You don't need to take too many notes because we'll provide you with a recording of the webinar itself following on from the session. As I said, interact. So we want you to use the QA button on the control panel or the chat feature. Ask questions as you go through. When you think of it, write them down. If you're anything like me, I never remember that question I thought of unless I write it down. But ask it as we go along. And if it's relevant to what I'm already talking about with Jeremy and Richard, I'll ask it then and there. If it's not, or if it's something that we're going to cover later on, I'll leave it till later on in the session. But make sure you write it down so we've got it there and we can address it as we go. If you're listening through headset or speakers and you have any issues with your connection to the webinar, just on the control panel, use the raise hand button and one of the Auscontact team will jump in and try and help. Alternatively, you will have had a phone number in your registration email. So jump on to one of those numbers and you can listen that way. Again, I know this is a great opportunity, not something that we always have. The session is exciting. Getting to lift the lid on how successful organisations are doing things can really give great insights into those elements that you can step in tomorrow and actually make change with. So to get us going, I'm going to introduce the two speakers that we've got joining us today. Firstly, Richard Lundgren from Calabrio. Richard's the Customer Success Manager. We do a lot of work with Richard. I do a lot of webinars with you, Richard. I think we were only talking about this the other day. And I love the experience you bring from all of the customers you are working with and have worked with in the past. Just adds some of the insights that we can actually learn from and what's worked well and where some of those challenges are that you help them overcome. And then, of course, we've got Jeremy, who is the Senior Manager Workforce Planning at Aussie Broadband. Jeremy, welcome. Obviously, we've spoken in the past. We've seen your success as a highly recognised WFM expert within the industry. So we're really excited to learn more today about what's happening at Aussie Broadband and kind of where you see the future going for you. So, guys, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Um, Welcome to our first webinar. It's always, a little bit daunting, but equally a great opportunity to talk about what's going on across the industry. So thank you both for joining me.
Happy to be here.
So we're going to get right into this because I'm pretty sure we're going to have quite a bit of interest from the audience as far as questions and I challenge everybody. A hard question is also a good question. So let's have them. But as I said, super excited to pick your brain, Jeremy, and really learn more about what Aussie Broadband are doing. Obviously, super familiar brand, recognized in the market as an innovative organization, customer obsessed, and solution focused. So, a starting point that actually shows your position within the market. But I love the fact that you're always looking for more. You're always looking for more ways to enhance that experience, both for the customer and for your people. Um, so yeah, I know that doesn't happen by accident. So part of what we're hoping to learn from you today is a little bit of that ongoing journey. Kind of tell us a little bit about the environment that you started with. What was it that actually gave you and gave Aussie that push or that aha moment that said, how do we get on and establish that formal WFM practice? So, can you give us a little bit of insight around that?
Absolutely. As you said, Aussie's done really, really well. They've been probably one of the most trusted telco brands in Australia at the moment. But they started from humble beginnings in terms of helping people gain access to the internet in rural spaces, and they've rapidly grown in the last 5 years. And essentially gone from like a 30-seat contact center to a medium-sized contact center within a few years. So it's ultimately with rapid growth, there's not always changes put in place to keep up with the rapid growth. So hence, sort of the decision was made to look at workforce management in terms of how that can sort of provide some efficiencies in terms of making sure that we have the right people in the right place for our customers. Luckily, the technology was kind of starting to be put in play before it came to Aussie. So a couple of years back, they brought in the Calabrio system to integrate with their telephony platform. And essentially, there was a rostering officer, but they were kind of self-taught and put into play to try and use the system at the time. And hence, I've been with Aussie now probably 7 months, and I've been brought in to sort of embed the end-to-end WFM fundamentals from forecasting, capacity planning, scheduling, and real-time assistance for all of the contact centers in Aussie.
Awesome. Um, I love how you describe that evolution. And Richard, obviously, you guys have been working with Aussie for quite some time. Have you, I guess from your role as a partner, actually supporting them, particularly what we're talking about here with this WFM solution as well? Have you kind of been watching that evolution of, kind of strategic thinking? They're now at the point where they're saying, we've grown, we've got to go down that next step path. And if you think about some of the pain points, potentially that were being experienced that led to then saying, actually, we need someone now to come in and really kind of, do that end-to-end view. Are you seeing others pick up that same practice? Are you seeing others really being overtly on top of when it's time to step up to that next version of the solution itself to really sort of think about where they are from a customer landscape, but equally you've got the tech there to support you, not just to let it go to waste. So obviously Aussie are doing this well. Are you seeing it more broadly across the environment?
Look, it's one of those things like, yeah, was involved with Aussie before Jeremy came in and kind of saw the pain they were having, hence where we are today. But in a broader market, there's some companies that do it really, really well.
Mm,
A lot probably at the bottom end of that scale. They don't. They've got a WFM platform, whatever vendor that may be from, whether it be us or someone else. Um, but there's no robust practice in place. There's no process in place. Because obviously, as you'd be aware, with WFM particularly, it is a practice, it is a discipline, and it requires process to go with it. And so you can't just kind of throw a system in and expect it to solve all your issues. It doesn't work that way. You need someone behind it driving not just the product, but also the cultural change within the organization, because that's a big part of it. And it's all very well to say, okay, we're going to move from Excel, we're going to move into a WFM platform. That's great. And even if you're running it well, if you don't have that cultural change that brings the contact center and the people along the ride with you, you're kind of on a hiding to nowhere, really, from that perspective. And I think that's the case in a lot of organizations. They get the product, but they just don't have the discipline and the practice to go with it, nor that. And that cultural piece is probably the most difficult piece of the lot to do. And you know, change management, change of the way people think is very, very tough. We've done it this way for 10 years. Why can't we continue doing it this way? Which you see over and over and over again. So obviously trying to work with organizations to, I'm not trying to come in and tell them how to do things or to change their world, but I'm trying to open their mind to what's possible if they look at the way things are. And it's really important to bring not just upper management, but the agents along for the ride as well. It's after all, it's their contact center. We're the support network behind them. They're the guys and girls on the phones are doing the hard slog. We've all been there, so we know what it's like. So what we're putting in place, does it work for them? If it works for them, you're going to have much more happy agents. You will get better results, and you'll get a whole lot less attrition. So it all goes hand in hand, I think.
yeah, no, definitely some really important points there. And I think, we do still see organizations thinking about WFM as a standalone. Yeah, it connects to the contact center, and we all hear the magic term right work, right people, right time, as if it's something really easy because it's easy to say. But I think you're right. Where we're seeing far more success in organizations is where they are seeing the strategic value of how WFM actually understands the environment and drives and supports decision making within it.
Yeah,
Jeremy, if you think about some of the challenges that Aussie Broadband were facing, particularly as they were starting to grow, suddenly, what were the types of things that made Aussie think about this more strategically? So if you think about WFM as practice, you're now at this point where you're coming up with how do we be more strategic? How does it support our growth without any compromise to customer? Um, what were you seeing? What was being seen in the market?
I guess from what we were seeing is probably one of the things was lack of visibility. I think,
Yeah.
you know, how is the business tracking in terms of, call volume, average handle times? I think there are, in the early stages of any business, there's all these different sort of people doing their own different reports, but there's no centralized view to give to leadership, sort of on how you're tracking with certain metrics, right? Because with contact centers, we always look at, forecast versus actual volume, average handle time, your shrinkage percentages. And it was about really sort of creating that view so we could kind of track how we've been traveling, right? I think some people underestimate that visibility bit a little bit because, like for example, being able to sort of track your call volumes to just show you if you're increasing or decreasing. But if you're increasing rapidly, what's driving that change? Where do we go and look to figure out what that is? Is there too much shrinkage happening? Is there a bit of a lens that we need to put on absenteeism maybe, or anything like that as well? I think that was one of the things that kind of said, hey, we need somebody to come in to kind of give us this view of how we're performing and if we're being efficient and allowing the right people the right time, as we say, but also to make sure that our current practices are fair and that we're utilizing the system to its fullest capability. I think the rostering was being done, but essentially the regular cadences and the settings and things like that needed to be, reviewed and changed to suit what the business needs. So really it was around that visibility and clarity of what is the business trying to achieve when it comes to, trying to service their customer. What is the service level target? What are your abandon rates and those types of things as well?
So it's, the reality is every person on this call, every organization with a contact center has those same challenges, right? And it is about, that maturity of the system to kind of say, we need to not just understand the drivers, but think about how do we change those re-emerging into the future and be far more strategic with it. And Richard, I know you mentioned earlier, spreadsheets, and we know there's a lot of very successful organizations still using spreadsheets. But again, it's about saying, what are the triggers or what are the things that happen within our organization that say now it's time to step it into
look,
the next iteration?
Spreadsheets are amazing, friend. I've still got all mine from 25 years ago. We all do, I think, and I'm sure Jeremy would have a bunch, tucked away somewhere as well. And again, if worst case scenario, if the system crashes, bring up your old spreadsheets and carry on like nothing ever happened because you know the mechanics behind it all, right? So, but as you both said, right place, right time, all that kind of stuff. That's great. But then look at the metrics as well these days. Obviously contact centers run on metrics, and if you can translate, certain things into dollar figures for the bottom line, that's obviously a big thing for the business. But also, you've got these days particularly, it's not like the old galley slave model that used to be around, back in the day. People matter now. People have lives outside the contact center, and one of the things that I got tasked with Aussie by Jeremy and one of the other people in there was we need to be able to report on who's had consecutive days off in a specific date range, like for fairness, right? So that everyone kind of gets the same type of thing. So there's obviously a large consideration or a big consideration of the people, which is important. So metrics aren't the be all end all. I mean, I know there's always been a lot of focus on service level, average speed of answer, average handle time. Handle time, now let's get it down by a minute or two. Is that the right approach? Or do we need to actually increase it to give a better customer service, less churn from customers, that kind of thing? So it kind of works both ways. So there's so many different things that tie into that WFM practice. And this is where a good WFM manager will go to the business and make recommendations based on evidence that, hey, we need to look at this or we need to look at that because of these reasons. So that's, again, the sign of a WFM person that actually knows the business they're working in. I think that's important to know the business. And I mean, Jeremy's been 7 months. I think he's learned quite a lot in that 7 months about Aussie, as he would have to. But then he can go to, general managers, that kind of thing, with valid recommendations based on not just anecdotal data, but actual evidence of these are the things that are happening. If we put this in place, this is likely to be the result. And then you kind of make those forward gains from there.
Love that. And I do think it's really important to call out that focus, right? I think we've gone from a time where it was enough to be a good WFM manager that knew about the data, and what that cause and effect was as far as, like you said, call volumes, call drivers, all that stuff, right? The stuff that matters. So I'm not trying to be blasé about it, but actually successful organizations have that equal focus from a WFM lens on people. Because guess what? People solve the other things as well. Yeah, you need the mechanics in place to actually get the work to them, but engaged, supported, empowered people are actually what solve your problem for your customers. It's not the WFM solution that actually solves the customer problem. It's your people working through your solution. So I love that focus. Jeremy, if you think about your role, critically, you need to get that balance right. You need to get the people balance as well as the work balance. And Richard, kind of referred to that ability to influence. How much of your role is about building that connected story between the people impact, the work and the data, and actually how you then build that as a narrative to help make strategic decisions across the organisation? Is that a big focus for you?
Absolutely. I think WFM has evolved over the years, as you said. It's not just about metrics and scheduling people anymore. It's also about taking people into consideration and making sure you kind of bring everyone along the journey. Implementing WFM from scratch would be hard if you're just coming in and you're kind of just playing with metrics and scheduling. So it's about making sure that you've got the relationships and the communications with the right people to be able to do what you do. In my case, I was very lucky because coming on board, my project sponsor, who I report to, our chief people officer, people and reputation officer, is the sponsor of a project. And one of the things with WFM, sometimes when you're kind of analyzing all these things, you need the right audience to show all of these findings and to discuss and make decisions. So we were able to kind of take a project lens to form like a WFM steering committee, which contains some of the key decision makers and from general managers and executives. And then we're also able to form a WFM working group, which was me combined with a lot of operational people in terms of senior managers of different business units and people from within the P&R / HR space as well. So, at the end of the day, the WFM system is very capable and highly configurable, but it's about what do you put in to that system to make it do the things that you need it to do, because Calabria's got a lot of configurability. So it's about, okay, when you start the project, what is the clear goal? Like, what are we trying to achieve? So we can put those settings into the systems. What are our occupancy levels? What are our service level targets? How much shrinkage do we factor in for? But then it's about, okay, if you're starting to now implement long-term forecasting, well, there's information that we need from the wider business, how are we marketing, what system changes or product changes are coming, right? So getting those regular cadences with the right audience to give you that information put in the systems is what makes, a proper WFM practice, because now we have regular cadences with our marketing team and product team and project team. So now we can feed all of this information, into our forecast long term to be able to be better prepared. And the end goal is getting the right people at the right time. So that definitely helps. But too often I see in the past, and hopefully I'm not rambling on a little bit here, but it's always been sometimes WFM versus everybody else. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things to add, Jeremy, is that, and Fran, I think, if you're a WFM management organization, you're, for want of a better term, managing upwards as well. You need to educate the people above you. From team leaders up to general management. They kind of loosely know what WFM is and what it's for, but they don't have a full understanding. So I think you need to educate them to, or guide them, I guess, is for a better word, as to what it is, what its purpose is, how it can help the business, and then get that feedback. I mean, Jeremy gave a perfect scenario there with marketing. I mean, I worked in the internet business probably more years ago than what some people on this call were not even born yet. And it was the same thing. Marketing would send out stuff, and then the calls would flood in, and they'd go, well, why are people calling you? It's like, well, you sent out information and invited them to call us. We need to know that information. We want to, obviously, in WFM, you want to work with the business and help them wherever possible. So if marketing is sending out a campaign, or if they've got a call to action TV campaign, or whatever the case may be, if you know about it, you can be in a better position to actually service those calls when they come in and get the acquisition that marketing are driving. If you don't know about it, those calls what happens to them? You know?
Yeah. And look, even more importantly, the next step is if you're part of that conversation, you can influence
Yeah,
the
yeah,
marketing team go out because you guys would be well aware. I can't tell you how many organizations I talk to and leaders in both WFM or contact center or even CX. They're saying, oh, part of my job this quarter is I've got to reduce calls by X amount. And I'm like, given you don't create any calls, um, that's a really interesting level of accountability
mm,
for, you know, yes, you give insight to them, but actually every call driver is not from the contact center. So it's
mm,
interesting how the responsibility falls on you. Um, Jeremy, I love that you report to a chief people officer. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
Worked
think,
out well.
yeah, but I think what it speaks to though is clearly the culture of Aussie around the importance of connecting what is essentially a function that is probably one of the highest impact to people, particularly in that service delivery environment. Um, Having that responsibility sit squarely with the chief people officer means that actually the care as well around your people is front of mind. So I love that. Well done to Aussie. Um, the role, Richard, you described there around guidance, education, it's a hard line, right? Because
yeah,
actually, the last thing you need is an exec team saying, "Hey, I just got the SMS telling me about the last 15-minute interval," and you're like, "Guys, stop looking at the wrong things."
yeah,
But actually, what you need to build is how does this data tell the right story that
yeah.
actually showcases the different levers available to you and the impact of those levers potentially. Jeremy, 7 months in. Um, Obviously, there's a whole lot that's happened in 7 months, not only for you to
Yeah.
get your head around the practice and where it's heading, but it sounds as though there's an incredible alignment between your purpose, so what you're striving for, and the organization's strategic goals as a whole, right? So I love that alignment. Um, are you seeing that play out differently? So obviously, there's this clear alignment. You're focused in on learning a new business, learning a new function, setting up a practice. Is success totally wrapped around those strategic goals for you? What does success look like for you as a practice leader?
Um,
That's a big
Success.
question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big question. Um, yeah, look, there's total alignment. There was, great conversations when they come in terms of appetite for change and appetite for, implementing WFM for sure. I think in itself, the culture at Aussie since arriving has always been the look to continuously improve,
Mm.
and things like that. So it kind of aligned with my type of personality in terms of trying
Yeah,
to find those things right. So definitely heaps of alignment on that front. Um, and yeah, there's been always, I guess, a forum of people that I can go to talk about how we're tracking along the lines of meeting the strategic goals. And in the forums, I'm always talking about, hey, these are some initiatives that we can look at. These are some areas that we need to look at. And we kind of work in a way where we're prioritizing what's more meaningful to my stakeholders first. So
yeah,
essentially, I'm moving along the way with what the business is trying to accomplish first at the right time, because timing is also everything as well. You can't do too much change at once, and you can't not change because then otherwise the times move you as well. So yeah, and it's also, if I can add on to the sort of previous question, it's also making sure that we're bringing everyone along the journey.
yeah,
So I was very lucky to have a forum and being able to talk with everybody from contact center agents to senior managers, and establishing a regular cadence with operations because we have multiple sites in different states. So
yeah,
introducing those right forums to communicate with and to prioritize with, but also operationally like a weekly handover meeting where we're handing over sort of the fourth week of schedules in advance. keeps us on top of things. What new things are we introducing? What training are we planning for? And it gives my stakeholders that confidence that we're moving along the right journey, and everything that I'm doing is aligning with what my executives and general managers are looking for.
Have you seen those forums really evolve as you've kind of gone along the journey? Like I know what it's like when you first join an organization. It's like, information overload. You kind of start and they can feel a little bit, I don't know, a little bit static, right?
Yeah.
But I'd love to get some insights from you on how they have evolved and, whether they've become more effective as, particularly that operational one where, it's so important for people to feel that their voice is heard, right? So have you seen those really grow and change over that 7 months?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in preparing for it was also making sure that you have the right visualizations to show your stakeholders, as in, you know, you know, in terms of showing forecasts and how many people you schedule, what do you plan for, where are your coverage gaps, and those types of things. And it has evolved because the discussions have become more in-depth, and it's become a forum where WFM and operations can talk to each other and give feedback, or they could ask to see different views of things and things like that. So, we continue to evolve our information pack, and the conversations have been more in depth now in terms of making sure that we're planned properly for our operational needs. And yeah, it's been a good evolution and discussion for him. So, and it's actually evolving even more because now there's considerations of it sort of not being just the senior managers, but also involving the team managers as well. And creating that forum of discussion between the team managers and WFM as well.
Yeah. And I know, again, going back to that educative kind of role, there's nothing quite like those sorts of regular forums to help people have that better understanding, particularly to build the trust between the areas. I love seeing organizations with a really cohesive relationship with, again, you sort of started on it at the beginning. If you can have WFM that it is just another arm, it's a part of, and it's totally connected, both, kind of strategically aligned, but actually you all recognize you're on the same page. Seen organizations where there's a real us and them kind of kind of construct. And I mean, Richard, you must see it in some organizations that you're working with. Obviously, it's a different kettle of fish here. It sounds like there's a real partnership.
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, yes, I do see it. And yeah, every time I see it, it's like, well, how do I help them fix that? And it's really tough, even when you say like, yeah, okay, let's have a workshop and kind of get people in a room and discuss the where WFM comes into this picture, that we need to work hand in hand, side by side with operations, because both are important to the business, right? So obviously they've got their metrics to look after, we've got ours. But ultimately, it's the people at the end of the day. Still, it comes back to the people that they're on the phones, the guys and girls on the phones. There is more of that kind of same page thing happening these days than what it used to be. I mean, if you go back, go back 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was almost a war inside the organization with the us and them thing. So that is vastly improving. And look, I think the standard of workforce management itself has to improve, because look at the contact center these days with the different channels coming in that weren't there before. You've got chat, you've got Facebook, you've got WhatsApp, you've got all these different channels. Plus, then you've got SMS, you've got email, you've got tasks, you've got back office stuff, you've got voice, and then they want to blend it all together, right? So it's become a far more complex. Then bring in things like AI chatbots, agentic AI for the agents, all this kind of stuff that comes in. So the agents aren't just there taking phone calls anymore. It's become more an emotional. There's a lot more emotional stuff going on with the agent, particularly with the AI bots coming in and taking some of that low-hanging fruit out of the picture.
Yeah.
That means that the people on the phones are getting the much more difficult and complex. And that needs to be looked at, because if they get off if they got off some kind of difficult call that was fairly emotional, they may need to take 10 or 15 minutes after that. So, things like after call work and what have you, the traditional metrics where back in my day, it was like, our after call work we expect to be zero. You should be doing all that while you're on the call. That's changed dramatically because of the nature of the calls coming in now as well. So I think all that needs to come into play when you're thinking about your WFM practice. It's not just forecasting scheduling anymore. It's a whole lot more to it. It's become a lot more people focused and a lot more complex across the years. And with post-COVID as well now, the hybrid working model as well is another, so you've got half your agents that are maybe in the office 1 or 2 days a week, the rest of the time they're not. So that's where the visibility becomes a big play as well. You need that because you don't know what they're doing. Before you could stand up and have a look, or if you're in a larger call center, walk around the floor. That's not really an option anymore. So all the complexities come in. It's actually made the job of being a workforce manager far more difficult than what it ever used to be, I think.
You raised some really interesting points there. I think, the introduction of AI as far as clearing out some of that lower complexity workload. You're absolutely spot on. What we're seeing across the industry, and I can't see it changing in the next 3 years, right, is an absolute increase in the customer demographic of hardship, vulnerability, high needs, complaints. COVID did a lot of things. COVID saw a real shift in expectations from customers as far as appetite and tolerance. So I think we've seen a real increase on that as we've come out of COVID. But what we're definitely seeing now around, cost of living crisis and a whole lot of other things that are actually putting pressures on everyday families is that increased vulnerability from a customer profile perspective. Jeremy, if you think about your role, and again, Aussie's no different to other organisations that would be seeing that play out in the environment. If we know that we've got some automated solutions, some core reduction strategies, AI, taking away some of that, easier, lower complexity, transactional kind of interaction, leaving humans to deal with the tougher stuff. Are you building into your narrative with your senior executives the need to, kind of calibrate what that future forecasting needs to look like because of that changing profile? So are you constantly talking about what you're seeing from a WFM lens and how that aligns with what you know of that external environment and then that impact on Aussie Broadband as an organisation? So, again, back in the day, what, someone would say, right, we're going to introduce something that's going to get rid of 10,000 calls. That means what's left is going to cost us X. Off we go. Suddenly that's not the case. We're now in an environment where it's absolutely not the case. 1 + 1 does not equal 2 anymore for a lot of this. How are you building that story in Aussie Broadband?
Well, we're in constant communication about how we're trending and what's coming, right? So it's looking at the data. We've recently made a product change and we can see that's already created increased volumes, right? Because it's a very popular thing that we've launched with our customers with high-speed plans. And it's just making sure that essentially letting the business understand that these changes are great, but then what does it have, impact it had to our customers? Are they going to need to call more often now to help them get set up and things like that? Can we maybe improve that process so that they don't have to call? Is there maybe some gaps in our processes that we need to figure out and things like that as well? So those, and that's where I go back to my beginning point. Sometimes people undervalue tracking of their volumes and handle times. People just think of it as, oh, we need to factor in the forecast. But those changes in those metrics tell you a story. It tells you how good a change has gone. It tells you if there's something that we need to change in a certain process to try and prevent these volumes. But it also can allude to, are there opportunities to kind of say, hey, with this increase, we might be able to implement agentic AI to take care of this. And that way our agents are focused on more meaningful conversations with our customers. And one of my observations is our agents are great at troubleshooting. They go the extra mile, and hence why our customers love us. And to be honest, when I started, I didn't really know much about Aussie, but having now seen and observed and spent some time on the contact center floor, I can see why they are what they are in terms of trusted brand. But going back is the trend of talking about volumes and impacts is, and with the right cadences, is now ongoing, and it's part of our operations now. So we're able to determine what do we need and where are opportunities to self-service and make more efficiency. And that's why I say don't underestimate the constant tracking of your volumes in HT, because it tells a story, and it could bring the right attention to the right places.
But actually what you've just described is not about, so it is about the tracking, right? But actually it's also about thinking differently about the metrics.
Yeah.
So as you said at the very beginning of that, originally those metrics were just about the forecast. They were just about, have we got the right people that are going to answer those calls to meet the abandonment rate that we've set as an organisation, whatever it is. But actually what you've just described is incredibly strategic to understand patterns, behaviour responses, response outcomes from campaigns, and to be able to then use that information, evidence-based information, to actually support next level strategic decision making within the organisation. And I love that is actually how Aussie Broadband is giving you or empowering you to actually bring that to the table. That's actually really exciting, because there are a lot of organisations that are still using metrics the same way. And there's this ongoing discussion: are our metrics right? Do we need to rethink as an industry? Do we need to rethink metrics? I think actually the right question is, do we have to change how we use those metrics? Do we have to change what they're informing and how they're actually driving more strategic outcomes? Because I think what you've just described is that's how you guys have evolved. It is no longer just about the metric in a one-dimensional manner. Of course, they always form part of our planning tools. It is what it is, right? But how do you take it to the next level and actually leverage what that real insight is telling you? So yeah, I think that's exciting.
It's actually become a little easier, I think, too, Fran, these days with analytics and that kind of thing as well.
True.
Why are people calling us? I mean, back in the day, you'd have to go and come up with some kind of report or trawl through your SAP system or whatever CRM you're using. These days, if you've got your analytics configured correctly, it's all sitting there. So you know exactly why people are calling it, typically. So the tools are now available and in place that will give that level of detail. Like if you get you get a peak in the middle of the day in a particular queue, for example, you now know what drove that, right? Whereas previously, back when I was still doing operational WFM, you had to go trolling around through agents and teams.
You had to go listen to calls. You had to ask the agents.
And if you didn't have the answers, of course, it was on your head. Well, why can't you tell us why they're calling us? Like, well,
there would be a lot of assumptions, Richard. We all know what that is.
Yes.
And these days, I think so. Although the WFM itself has become far more complex, some of the things that we used to have great difficulty finding are now at our fingertips.
More easily readily available.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think absolutely the tools are helping, and that progress has kind of set up this evolution of WFM as practice. I still think, and maybe Jeremy, you can give some insight onto this. Think, again, I hate talking about COVID, but I tend to still at the moment. I think we saw a real transition of expertise again through COVID. And I think that there are a lot of organizations that have the tools in place to give them the data, but actually there's still this disconnect between what the data is really telling us or telling them, and how they use that to inform decision making. So I think there's still almost this a bit of a gap, right? And maybe it's to do with a couple of things. Maybe it's to do with having the right support in place within the organisation that says, actually, you're empowered and open. We want to hear about this. We want to use it. How do we kind of come up with solutions together? Yeah,
I think sometimes, friend, and I still think today, is contact centers are sometimes underestimated. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
I think organizations need to realize that if anything goes wrong, the first people that hear is the contact center. If
yeah.
you
Yep,
make a change, if you introduce something new, well, the contact center is going to be the first place the customer calls.
Mm.
So essentially, the face and the voice of the organization is your contact center. So therefore, making sure that you're on top of those metrics and understanding the story goes a long, long way. But it also gives you, like I said, like a lot of insight of, what are the things and opportunities we need to work on to make our customer
yeah,
experience better as well.
yep,
Yeah, and I still think it's underestimated today.
Good.
You know, it's at the end of the day, the contact center is part of your brand. It is part of the customer experience, and therefore it's a gold mine of opportunity and data and information and insights that should be used to kind of shape
Mm.
your strategic direction as well.
yeah. No, I would definitely agree with that, and I think I would actually take it a step further and say often your contact center actually forms and delivers your customer experience on behalf of your organization, right? Often they are the only people that your customers are ever speaking to, ever. And their view of you as an organization is based on how they felt when they had to actually deal with someone. If they can deal with you as an organization online and it's seamless and it's great and it's easy, they'll have a particular view. But as soon as they need a person or a solution that requires them to actually take that next step, it's made and broke in that one interaction. And that's what they remember. And I do think you touched on it earlier, Jeremy, that the agents at Aussie really do focus on going above and beyond as far as I would say they're problem solvers. They are incredibly curious around finding ways that are outside the box um, to actually solve the problems. I can say that from my own experience. I think the other thing Aussie have done really well is tap into the market in a way that sees, like, if I think about my experience with Aussie as my provider, it was because my 20-year-old son said that's who you should go with. So it's this whole marketing piece on that recommendation, that solution focused referral system almost through success. So I think that's a really clever way that Aussie have positioned themselves in the market. But that's not enough on its own, right? So to then actually have an interaction that you feel like somebody is going above and beyond, which goes back to, Richard, your point about it can't be that you've only got 3 minutes to answer this call, when in fact, if you stay on it, over service for some people's lack of a better term, that customer is going to be so much stickier as far as loyalty and
Yeah,
longevity, et cetera, et cetera.
and you got to be reasonable. I mean, obviously, what I found over the years was if you value the agents, you take care of them, they'll take care of your business, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, and I get really sick of hearing, oh, you just work in a call center. That infuriates me, right? Because I can rattle up a whole bunch of people that just worked in call centers and now travel the world because of the
Yep.
fact they worked in call centers, right? I've been fortunate enough myself to travel. I know lots of other people who have done the same thing. And hey, we all start on the phones doing tech support or doing customer service as well. So it's really infuriating when that happens. So look after the guys and girls on the phones. They will take care of the business and the metrics will take care of themselves in a lot of cases. If you've
Love
got
that.
if that culture is right, it just all falls into place. It's like a perfect marriage, I guess. But you've got to get that culture and that treatment of the people right in the first place. I think Aussie do that in spades. I mean, I've been through all their centres in Victoria, and there's a buzz about it. I mean, it's like I've been fortunate enough to work in and also visit many centres over the years, and some you kind of walk in, you can feel that energy and feel that vibrant and that buzz. Others you walk into, it's like a funeral home,
Yeah.
and it's like, would you work there? I wouldn't. some of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure they do their job. They've got a thing to do, but are they happy agents, or are they going to attrit and go and work somewhere that's got more of a vibe with the whole, the team stuff going on, the colours and the decoration? And I mean, I worked for America Online way back when, and it was like not so much here in Australia, but in the US, they'd pick up a Harley and ride the Harley through the call center. Hey, win this if you do X, Y, and Z, or take a balloon ride, or they were like, the American call centers were full on, right?
Yeah. We need to bring some of that here.
Oh,
Um,
we're not quite the
no,
same,
I'm
but
only joking.
but some like Aussie and others I've been into have that that kind of vibe to them, and it makes a big
Yeah.
difference, huge difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I would hazard a guess everybody listening knows that feeling you're describing. We all know the difference between walking on a floor that has it, right, versus one where you can almost feel that people are actively looking for somewhere else to work. Jeremy, I want to talk a little bit about the cultural shift that we've talked, both of you have referenced this. Introducing a robust practice, a WFM practice anywhere can sometimes come with some real kind of perceived views from the people you're doing it with and
Yeah.
to, right? I'm talking about, that classic contact center view around things like micromanagement, inflexibility, all those things that say, what do you mean you're telling me I can't do X, Y, and Z? How did you come at change management as a whole? And obviously, you've talked a little bit about how you've built those right relationships across your networks. But how did you manage the change management? Richard said earlier it's one of the most important things. I totally agree. What did you do? How did you think about communication with your team? And how big's your WFM team? I know we've got a question here from very early on in the chat that was just talking about how many agents you have and how many people in the WFM space since
Sure.
this change has happened.
Sure. I mean, look, we're still very much along the journey, and we're still very much in our early days. But my team at the moment comprises of one workforce planning analyst that is responsible and assisting me with all the forecasting and cap planning and scheduling. And essentially, at the moment, I have two real-time analysts who are digging into the plans every day, making sure that we go to plan and communicating with the business in terms of recommendations on how they're performing for the day and interventions needed as well. But we're still evolving the process as we go along. I've only really sort of formalized my roles in probably a month ago, and I
Yeah.
have a new hire actually joining me on Monday to come along for the journey.
Exciting times.
Exciting times. I'm looking forward to it. But also, look, relationships is very important. But it's about how you communicate as well in terms of educating and helping people understand that there's people always form
Why?
a narrative around certain things, like
Yeah.
you're doing things to take away from me, or you're just not wanting to pay me, or whatever it may be. And just making sure that any changes you make is coming, I guess, from top down.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky to have that forum with the key sort of decision makers as well. But then I also make sure that once that decision's made, that I'm communicating to anybody
Yes.
else involved operationally, and making sure that I continue to go down the line, and just telling people in terms of why the changes come about and why we're doing it, right? I had one of those sessions last week with a group of team managers who wanted to know more about how we do things and why we do things and where we are as a business. So we had a great long hour chat, and I was able to educate them on, this is our WFM approach. This is how we do things. This is why we've changed some rotations and things like that. So then they understood, but also letting them understand the direction we're headed in, and how we're going to evolve to support them in the future as well. So to me, it's just making sure that you have the right forums in place, that you're focused on building relationships with your stakeholders, and you're not just being a WFM person in the corner. Even before you make changes, there might be people you want to consult and get advice off. Is this the right thing to do? What do you think about this? And those interactions are key, because if you want something robust in place, you've got to kind of consider bringing everybody along the journey, because WFM is not just the data thing anymore. It affects people. It affects, the business and things like that. So, very key to really have those, those relationships of, just what do you call it? Those honest relationships.
Yeah, love it.
You can have proper conversations without treading on eggshells and things like that. And too often people are too hesitant to create those. You've got to be
Yeah.
proactive. When I first came um, in trying to navigate my way through the business, I just took it upon myself to go and figure out who's who. If I need some data insights, well, who's the right people to talk to and data? Let's book a meeting and introduce myself. Getting the regular cadence going with marketing, projects, and products. I didn't wait. I didn't ask somebody else to organize it. I went and introduced myself to those people individually and gave them a presentation of how we do things. And now we meet up on a regular monthly basis. I think sometimes when WFM is getting started, like you just kind of sit in the corner, but you've got to be proactive in meeting these key stakeholders and people that will contribute to the overall process as well.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I think the other thing it does, it gives permission for those questions to be asked and creates that environment of trust, which is fantastic. Sorry, how many seats do you have? What's the size of your contact center?
Oh, okay. So Aussie's grown from like 30 seats to probably now over 500 combined in the contact
it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
And to piggy off what you guys previously said about Aussie, we are hiring at the moment. So there are some contact center positions if anybody's interested in Victoria. And probably some to Perth in the future as well. So shameless plug. But if you'll see some advertised roles if anybody wants to join Aussie as well.
Love that. Richard, it might be something for you, but we've got a question here in relation to how those different AI features in WFM, so process end to end, if we think about integrating forecasting across all those channels that you mentioned before, scheduling against skills, and channel workload balancing, how's Aussie applied those capabilities to build a robust WFM practice? Like, have you tapped into the system?
There's a lot of that stuff in the product now, a whole lot more on the way, on the roadmap. We've got, there is some AI in the forecasting. You can just talk about AI in forecasting. Scheduling is dynamically allocated based on skills in the background. That's kind of always been there. So AI and machine learning. But one thing was as I mentioned before, the analytics piece. Obviously, we've got different levels of analytics that you can get with the product. But even at the basic level, you can still have your categories and phrases and kind of get information that way. But if you kind of move up a level into something like trending topics, that integrates directly into the intraday screen. So you get a peek in the intraday screen, that's what drove it. And you've got that like literally in near real time. You can see what's trending over a particular time. You can compare that trend from this month to last month, same day, month, whatever the case may be. As I said, there's a whole lot of interesting or sort of exciting AI stuff coming in the first half of this year. Already there's Agent Assist, where agents can now do things like apply for leave and voluntary time off, what have you, via an AI chatbot, natural language. I think currently supports 60 different languages by default.
Wow.
There's also Supervisor Assist coming, and predictive actions are coming as well. So where instead of, and we're not trying to put real-time analysts out of a job here, but predictive action would be like, well, hey, your service level has dropped from 80 to 70 in the last X intervals. Here's some options as to what you might want to do about it, typically. And that's it. And again, the use cases for that are almost unlimited, realistically.
Yeah.
And it's still, there will be an option to say, hey, do it for me, right? Which is what AI does. But I think most WFM people will look at the recommendations and make that decision. But in some of the smaller organizations that maybe don't have a dedicated WFM person, which I kind of still dispute and think they should have, but some just don't have that manpower. So it might be a team leader or a group of team leaders doing it. Some of that predictive action stuff where you can tick the toggle and say, "Hey, make the decision for me," will be
Mm.
a game changer for those kind of smaller or widely distributed call centers where you might have 8 or 9 locations across the country, each wanting to do their own thing. That
Mm.
could be a game changer for that. So keep your eye on it. There's a lot more, AI is the focus on everything these days. There's a lot more AI coming. And again, we're not trying to put people out of work here. It's another tool in the toolbox, essentially,
Yeah.
the way I look at it.
No, love that. I'm mindful of time. Jeremy, obviously, for you 7 months, but if I look at the last probably 3 to 5 years for Aussie Broadband, there's been exponential growth, clearly. Um, they've not lost sight of, kind of what's mission, what's happening. But if you think about what's coming for you guys, does it excite you or scare you? And yeah, what is it? What's still at its core? This customer obsession that is almost palpable with how Aussie is positioned in the market.
I think that at their core will never change. Their stance on being the most trusted telco has never changed since I've been here. I don't think they'll ever go
Yeah,
away. But if I look on what's my horizon from a WFM perspective, I am very excited because we're looking at things in trying to increase some flexibility options in terms of contact center staff working in the business. We've already established more visibility with creating centralized reporting for our stakeholders. Calabrio has made that easy with even just with the out-of-box reporting. We're getting the right cadences in place with all of our stakeholders, but there are a lot of things to come where we'll be, looking at things like, more part-time availability, possibly looking at preferences. So all these exciting things in terms of offering flexibility to our workforce is what I'm really excited about in the future.
love it. Guys, thank you. I really appreciate it. I have learned heaps about, kind of that process that you've gone through, and we are super excited to see what the next 12 months holds for Aussie Broadband as a whole, but equally to, check back in with you, Jeremy, and hear more about kind of where you've had those wins and, maybe where some of the challenges were and how you overcame them. So thank you both, as always. Really insightful, and I'm sure everyone's really enjoyed hearing and learning more about it. So thank you both. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Guys, thank you all for coming along, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, everybody. See you.
Thanks
Thanks,
all.
guys.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.